America Fest brings together some of the best minds and biggest personalities from around the country, and far from being an ideological monolith, those in attendance represent the diversity of thought that make this country great, and they're all united by a sense of profound patriotism. Matthew Peterson is the editor-in-chief of Blaze News. He and I had the opportunity to sit down with a few of these colorful characters. Take a look. Jill Savage here with Matthew Peterson. We are at AmFest, America Fest. Everybody is here, and right now we have Benny Johnson, host of the Benny Johnson Show, and we're so excited to talk to you. And we want to go way back with you because we know you have a great career right now, but we want to start with your first job and your connection with Glenn Beck.
Yes. Glenn Beck having the Blaze in his office at Mercury Studios in New York City, and I was like employee number 3. Glenn Beck is the original gangster, man, and he has paved a path that the founders would have been very, very proud of. And I'm like, what a legend that dude is. His love of American history, his museum of artifacts, his preservation. I am telling you, I am endorsing right now Glenn Beck to lead the Smithsonian.
Yeah.
It must be Glenn Beck.
Yes.
We must have it now. Glenn Beck, nobody cares about American treasure more. And most importantly, because I've seen Glenn Beck act before, he must take over the National Treasure series from Nicolas Cage and become the literal Nicolas Cage. Glenn Beck is Nicolas Cage in real life, IRL.
Are we going to get a night at the museum with Glenn Beck?
I would follow the map that Glenn Beck finds on the back of a founding document in a heartbeat. Show me, Glenn. Get Ben Franklin's spectacles. Show me. I will go, Glenn.
They have George Washington's compass here at America Fest right now. You can see it. He brought it here.
Awesome. It's so amazing. No, he's just such a G. And here's what's amazing about Glenn is that he was first, right? The Blaze was first. You were first in an ecosystem that was totally corporately run, that suffocated independent voices, and Glenn was the first guy through the wall. And he deserves so much credit for that. Everyone from Tucker, Breitbart, there's so many people that coalesced around what the Blaze was building, and Glenn was first to see where the movement was going. So it must be so awesome for him to see the Joe Rogan, Theo Vaughn, interviews with Trump, what Glenn built more than a decade ago is actually created the roadmap for what won the 2024 election.
I'm so glad you say that. I think about that all the time, every day at the studios, because you look around and think Tucker before Tucker, leaving Fox, going natively digital. Yep. Now, your career, though, tracks along with this, right? Yes. Because you walk into that room and there's 2 or 3 people with Glenn, and you go on to have a career of your own, and here you are. Looking back right now, at this moment, right, when everything has changed, it's got to feel pretty good for you, along with a lot of other people. But talk a little bit about the trajectory to get there, because when all this started, right? The idea of these podcasts doing what they just did, the idea of everyone really doing what they just did with the means by which they did so, was a laughing joke. And still, right now in people's minds, right out there, we know them. They're still like, oh, this can't be real. But talk about that journey, because you were plowing forward for a long time here.
Okay, so we have a little bit of a live audience here. Let me ask the audience. Let me ask. Can you guys hear me? Okay, here we go. You can see it. So, do you trust CNN? When you see CNN report something, what do you say? This is fake news. That's probably what you say, right? People don't want large, corporate, publicly traded, World Economic Forum funded news anymore. They want it from creators and people that they trust, people they have a connection to. They actually want to get their news from personalities that they believe are real. And CNN isn't real. You turn on the lights, they're ghosts, they disappear. They're not a human being, and that's what this is. This is the greatest mirror that was ever invented. And people want to flip it open every single day and find out 2 things. 1, we're not doomed, okay? There's a reason to keep having kids and keep investing in this country. And 2, they want to see that they're not alone. And that's, I think, what is most important. Because the power of the machine, of the CNNs of the world, is to say, you're alone. You're the only guy with a MAGA hat on this flight. You're the only person who, like, cares about this country. And you're the only guy who's, like, still supporting Trump through all of the bullshit. Like, you're it. And it's isolating. And this changed everything because you realize you're not alone. And so that's what I think is most powerful, is that it really is about the connections with personalities. And you saw that, of course, in the 2024 election, finally snap the back of this corporate media monster, where you had these guys like Joe Rogan with these massive outsized endorsements. Like when Joe Rogan on the eve of the election just endorsed Trump, and he's like, yes, this is an endorsement of Trump. You could just say, it's over, baby, right? You just say, yo, it's over, right? Joe Rogan does more views than Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC combined in prime time. And that's a matter of media fact that is very tough to deal with. And so that's really powerful. People love and trust that guy. And it's a exciting landscape that we're living in right now.
The landscape, though, is no longer just Glenn Beck going out on his own. It's a pretty crowded space now. So how do you go through and try and have your impact on the space? What do you try to create here in this social media world that we have and with your show?
Oh man, I mean we're just meme lords, right? Like a dark meme lord, magic. Like okay, take a step back. Young people want to have the news reflected to them in a way that is entertaining, that is human, that is authentic, that's real. You want to watch Trump vibe for 3 hours, right? Like you know that Kamala Harris couldn't do that. It's hard to keep up a lie for 3 straight hours, right? Her entire life's a lie. We're sick of being lied to. Authenticity works, man. Authenticity works. And in this era, there's this entire world that the continuing resolution showed us this. They're still trying to do stuff in the dark of night away from the American people. And so the transparency, authenticity, reality of what's going on, and then speaking to the internet the way it likes to be spoken to, which is memes, actually, right? And a little like in humor. And there's some people that are really like leaning into that on the Blaze. I know obviously Alex Stein and Garrett's show, and then also like Jesse Waters, Greg Gutfeld, and stuff. Like it's neat, it's neat to see people try and like finally like be baptized into internet culture. But it is the predominant force in the country, and it just won us the damn election. So.
That is for sure. Speaking of winning the election, let's move forward and look at D.C. right now and think about what does our media space look like, right? As we have the White House and we've captured some of the high points in D.C. So that changes the dynamic, right, in terms of how we cover things. How do you game this out? What do you see as going to be most exciting moving forward for organizations like ours, yours to do?
Totally. Transparency. Transparency is going to be the name of the game. So we just proved it actually over the last weekend. If you are able to show the American people what's actually happening in Washington, D.C., you solve many problems. You will reactivate men. You will reactivate young men to like be shareholders in this system of the future of their country. That is actually the greatest threat to the system. Is showing the guy who drives, like the dude who drives in his job in his pickup truck and hits the same damn pothole every single day on his way to work. Like, who the hell's there to fill the pothole?
Yeah.
Right? And you have that guy, and he's like, you get radicalized by hitting that pothole every day.
Yeah.
You're like, wait a second, $1 trillion to Ukraine and nobody can fill the pothole on my street? And I'm busting my axle on this. Transparency is going to be the name of the game. We're going to launch a long-form podcast. We're going to launch an entirely new series. It's going to be long-form interviews with the people inside of the chairs. All of the heads of the federal government, the 19 Senate-confirmed cabinet positions, and a bunch of people that are making decisions to show people how the process works and expose and crack open like that black box that is our federal government.
Let me just say about that too, because I want you to riff off this. It's everyone. Like, because you have all kinds of quote unquote elite people, right, who are fancy lawyers or whatever.
Yep.
All of them will admit, if they're honest, I have no idea how the hell Washington D.C. works and who's really in charge right now. So I mean, you have the ear of billionaires as well as the guy who drives the garbage truck, because for everyone, right? It's literally like, explain to me what's really going on, because I know if I read the Constitution, that's not what's happening. And then there's also this question, like, I would love to see more almost TMZ style stuff, like, who are these people?
Right.
You know, like,
Yes.
where do they eat? Where do they, you know, what do they do for
Dallas
fun?
Airport. That's right. Go get him at the airport.
Yes,
We did TMZ him.
Yes.
Yo, we were sent a photo of Mitch McConnell in a wheelchair the other day. And somebody snapped it at the airport.
Yeah.
And it's like, wait a second, what are they hiding from us? Why is Mitch McConnell in a wheelchair? He can't even like move under it. And then now he's falling and stuff. And I want him to live a peaceful, happy life in a retirement home somewhere and resign.
Yes.
That's actually what I want for Mitch McConnell, right? Like, take care of yourself. You're in your 80s, bro. Okay? No ill will, but you're in your 80s. So resign and go take care. It's okay to take care of yourself. We need more of that transparency in DC. I know the Blaze has, and your show has like Bedford has great people in Washington. The Blaze has a studio in Washington, and exposing that. We need to see more of it. They shouldn't be allowed to hide and lie to us anymore.
Well, I look at the movement.
TMZ at the airport. That's so awesome.
It is.
That's a great idea.
We need more of that.
Because they're all rolling
on our
through
side.
Reagan. They're all rolling through DC.
I look at this movement, and I want to make sure that this moment that we have lasts, right? We all were a part of the Tea Party. We saw it come and go. But MAGA, Trump, making sure that America is still first and people still care. How do we make sure that this isn't just going to be a fleeting thing, that we have this energy of an America Fest and everything else that we have for this country and the love for this country continuing on?
Children. I tell young people, have 1 million kids. Like, fall in love and have 1 million kids. When you have kids, something remarkable happens. You become a stakeholder. You're kind of like a shareholder in this country. And you gain purpose as a man. And you start living for something else other than yourself. And it's an amazing, anybody who's been through, Gaston and I were actually just talking about it earlier today, right? Gaston's on his 12th kid. So is Elon Musk. Man, talk about a homie who has 7. This dude's got 7 kids. I could tell. I saw that mustache. I'm like, that guy's got 7 kids. Look at that alpha mustache. That's Project 2025. When you have kids, you have this connection with your Lord and Savior, the great beyond. You live for someone other than yourself, and you find purpose. And we need young men to find purpose and young women to find purpose. And that's what America First is actually all about. America First is leaving a country for our children that's better than how we found it. That's what a blessed generation does. We don't curse this land. And that actually inspires people to keep this country rolling in the direction that we are right now. This is one of the most optimistic moments in American history. Freaking awesome. And that's how you keep it. That's how you keep it going. I love the return to traditional values.
Yes.
I love the return to having and starting families. And the best part about this, have you ever met a lib? Nobody wants to procreate with those people, okay? They're hideous, they smell bad, all right? They're not having any kids, and they're castrating themselves. So the job's practically done for us.
I love it.
Makes sense to me. I will say, for the record, I believe that Gaston. I believe that Gaston. All of his children are with the same woman, unlike Elon. I think.
Yeah,
you equated the two. I think they're a little different, but yes.
Yes.
They're both doing their part.
Yes. Yeah. Just like in any business venture, Elon Musk is not going to pull out.
Yes.
And on that note, the great Benny Johnson, thank you so much for joining us and just taking a look at
never getting invited back.
Conservative media in the future
anytime.
of
That
the
was
country.
great.
It was totally worth it. Benny, thanks so much. Jill Savage and Matthew Peterson here at America Fest, and joining us now is John Strand. He's an actor and a model, and we know him from January 6th. We actually had you on Blaze News tonight, John. You had just been released. You still had the full beard. You came straight into our studios in Dallas. So what has life been like since you were released, since we saw you that day?
Jill and Matthew, thank you so much for having me on today. It has been quite a journey since I started this process, refusing the plea, going to trial, speaking publicly about the fraud of J6 and the weaponization of government, being sentenced to 3 years of prison, being abused in horrible isolation for weeks and weeks and weeks, overcoming that, pressing the appeal to the Supreme Court, being vindicated at the Supreme Court and being released a year later. And I walked out of the jail and into the studios at Blaze, and just, you guys met me and supported me, so thank you so much for that. It was amazing. And since then, I have hit the ground running. I advocate publicly on a daily basis for true justice for J6. We can and we will shift the narrative about this event and what justice actually means. Not just pardons, but exoneration for the innocent and significant restitution to make these people whole because they deserve it and it's the right thing to do, but also because our nation must have a reckoning with the reality of what J6 was and the constitutional implications of the egregious violations committed by the Merrick Garland and Matthew Graves DOJ. And there's real institutional problems that we have to address. So it's a really critical issue.
Let's get into that, John. I mean, first off, we should say a thanks to Steve Baker, who our audience knows, who really brought you in, into Blaze at that time, and it was just a privilege to have you right after you were released. I think the story and the recordings are, all online. Blaze, people can watch an interview with Steve, and it really is. It tells a lot of the story about January 6th writ large. So let's take this piece by piece. Let's start with the pardons. We'll start with the pardons. There's a lot of ways to do this, right? And a lot of people arguing, and they're going to be arguing in D.C. about how exactly the pardons should go down.
Right.
That they should go down is a must. What are your thoughts about what needs to happen?
So I wrote an open letter to President Trump. It's pinned to the top of my Twitter profile at John Strand USA. And I really urge Americans to read and share that letter. What I detail is essentially a very simple, straightforward way to handle this within President Trump's executive authority. Day one, minute one, an executive order that commutes all sentences and sets everyone free, pre and post-trial. It is egregious that people are being held in prison, sometimes for years, before they're even adjudicated. This is the most un-American thing we've ever heard of. So unlock the gates, open the chains, send them home, set them free day one, minute one. Secondly, an executive order to immediately cease and quash all ongoing prosecutorial action that they are still arresting people to this day. So those two things instantly must be ended and set right. And then thirdly, to issue a proclamation-style pardon. And we like to use the term proclamation of a pardon of innocence for J6ers who are clearly innocent, myself included, of course, that they would be exonerated in the public's mind. But the proclamation style there's a precedent for that with Jimmy Carter in the draft dodgers for the Vietnam War. And what that does is it allows the pardon to be available for anyone who qualifies for it when it's appropriate, because some of them are still in adjudication. I'm actually in that group. I was vindicated at the Supreme Court and beat the felony, but I still have 4 misdemeanors that I'm appealing. So I wouldn't be able to take a pardon on January 20th because I'm, God willing, going to be completely vindicated pre-pardon. But for many who were coerced into a fraudulent plea, and that's not possible, the pardon is absolutely necessary, it's morally imperative, and a proclamation pardon allows that to be available when they apply for it. And the qualification is very simple. If your constitutional rights were violated, you should absolutely be pardoned, no questions asked. And there are many reasons constitutionally why January 6 cases are invalid and should be nullified. But let's just start with the most simple one. The Sixth Amendment enshrines our guarantee of due process, and the word impartial is included in that amendment. So if you were adjudicated in the District of Columbia, which voted 95% for Biden and Kamala and is clearly far left, that is the antithesis of an impartial adjudication. And there are 0 January 6 cases that were adjudicated outside of DC. Every single one of them was a constitutional violation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. What about Jack Posobiec was another has been talking about also throwing another punch with some kind of class action lawsuit at some point.
Yeah, so we've been, as a J6 community, we've been talking about this for some time. And I can inform your audience that there is a group of leaders in the J6 community who are J6 defendants, myself included, that are imminently preparing a strategy to execute this so it will be maximally successful on behalf of J6ers and the justice that actually needs to happen. So stay tuned. We'll be communicating more about that very soon, but lawsuits and justice are coming.
Tell us a little bit more about how you keep in contact with the J6 community and how united you guys are just to go through and fight this to get what you feel like you guys justly deserve.
Yeah, it's a challenge. It's also a blessing just that God has knit together so many people from so many different walks of life and areas in America, but of course united by the fire that we've walked through and the pain and suffering that we've endured. It is a very intense thing. So there are a multitude of ways that we coordinate and communicate. We do obviously give thanks to Elon and the restoration of free speech on X. So we stay in communication that way, but there's a need for more communication and community organizing on this issue, and so we're gonna be releasing more information about that in the coming days.
I'd be curious of anything that we could do to help or bring attention to that, because it strikes me that in order to get anything done moving forward, that community organizing, it takes some money and some staffing, and it takes time. I'm aware of that. So let us know how we can help. In terms of what's going on right now in DC, there's a lot, right?
Yeah.
But one of the things that's directly relevant to everything that all of you guys have gone through is this FBI director position. And I'm curious your thoughts on that. I mean, Kash Patel is definitely charging forward in the nomination process. Hasn't made any missteps yet.
Yeah.
Is completely gung ho. And is that your guy? I mean, how do you feel about this?
Kash Patel is our guy. Kash Patel is President Trump's guy, so he's our guy, because President Trump is our president. We united in a historic landslide mandate to restore the rightful president back to the position that he has of leadership, and his cabinet needs to be confirmed. The Senate's job is not to obstruct the will of the people. It is to review and consult and give advice to the president and then support him in his clear landslide mandate. And that is what we, the people, expect and demand. And thanks to X, we are able to exercise our voices and make our demands clear, because it is our country. And President Trump is now our president, and his cabinet should be our cabinet.
But you're not only writing on X, John, you're also writing a book. You've been through so much. There's so much that is going to go into this. Tell us a little bit about Patriot Plea.
Man, thank you for mentioning it. It's a really powerful story. I know, because I just lived through it. It's really exciting. It's also really disturbing. All the details of what I endured, the suffering, the illegalities, the abuse. I name names. Everything is there. It will really shock you. It will disturb you. And that's necessary. Like I said, we need a reckoning with what's happening. But it isn't just a bad story or a tale of travail and terror, but it really is a clarion call to our nation about what America is and how we've lost our way and how we can revive this country, restore what we believe in, not just what we're against, but what we are for, right? And to understand the opportunity and the sacred duty that we have as citizens, what that means and how we grab a hold of it and really restore America to what it was intended to be. It's Patriot Plea.
I mean, I hesitate to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Most obvious thing in the world, right, just to the audience out there who I know gets it, the most obvious thing in the world, if we were flipped and on the other side, would be that this is a major motion picture. The most obvious thing in the world. You tell the story, it's compelling, the book comes out, it's going to be compelling, it's true, and then you memorialize that story with all kinds of media. So it makes me sick to even have to say it, but that's the next step, and I'll just say it for you, after we get this book out. All right.
I love it.
John Strand.
I happen to know an actor is ready to play the role.
There it is. Yes,
I've heard
he
this
can
one
play
available.
After I got kicked out of Hollywood.
Yes, absolutely.
It's
John,
time to make our own movies.
Where can people follow you?
JohnStrand.com and on X Twitter @JohnStrandUSA.
We will be following your journey because it is an important one. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Matthew. God bless you guys.
Jill Savage and Matthew Peterson at AmericaFest. And joining us now is Noelle Mering. She's a fellow at the DC-based think tank Ethics and Public Policy Center. So Noelle, thanks so much for joining us. You're also an author, and we'll get to all of that work in just a minute. But let's just look at
everything that's going on in Washington, D.C. right now. And I understand that you have an interest in faith and family and building that community. I don't think that D.C. could be further from the family and the faith and the community building. So how do you get these two worlds to come together?
Well, thank goodness I don't actually live in D.C., although there are good people there. But,
some of them, I assume, are good people.
There are. I think that, we're experiencing a real transition now with the woke movement, not in defeat. We need to be cautious, but also optimistic. It's really, there's a lot of people have broken through the spell of the woke possession. And I think what's happening is it's an inversion of reality. It's been telling us for years everything that's good for us is actually really bad for us. Like your faith is bad for you, your family is bad for you, marriage is bad for you. And so, what's good for you, what's actually bad. And so people have induced into transgressive behavior. How can I be as transgressive as possible? And the problem is that always fails because it gets really boring. What's transgressive today is going to be boring tomorrow, and you can't keep pushing the envelope further and further, trying to make a king of your own pleasure, And so eventually, the movement is saying, well, let's just separate everything by profaning everything. Separate men from women, separate mothers from babies, especially unborn ones. And, I think it exposes itself after a while, but it is, it's a bit like coming out of a narcissistic personality spell, where you've been distrustful of your own ability to perceive what's true. You've been manipulated, and once you realize it, you really can't unsee it any longer. And so I think that's a good source of optimism for us now.
So your last book was Awake, Not Woke.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's almost as if you're saying people are awakening, right? I mean, this is happening. Is that right? Because I feel the same way, where I don't want to be over, like Jill and I talk about this on the show, I don't want to be overconfident, but it is an enormous win. Like the veils are lifting. But how do you look at it? Is it awake, not woke? Okay, so are we awake now?
I think that far more awake than we were a few years ago. I see a major sea change over the last couple of years, and certainly with the election, that is incredible victory. But the movement does not take its ball and go home. Real ideologues are power hungry, and they just reinvent themselves. So, for example, I think the biggest thing they're doing now that's corrupting our society is targeting children in a deep way. So you look at something like social emotional learning, where they're constantly asking kids, were your parents there for you? Are you safe? Do you feel like you belong? Has someone been unfair to you? Have someone hurt you? And we're training kids to have what I call a reverse examination of conscience, where we are training ourselves to examine everyone else's conscience. In other words, in order to induce people into victim mentality, you have to train them to become an accuser.
I look at this and say, okay, yes, people are lifting the veil. Things are happening in the right direction. But is this just the beginning of the battle? Where are we on this scale, on this journey of awakening at this point?
I think there's a lot of promising things happening. I mean, one of the cultural things I see shifting is that women are starting to want to be like women again. Men are starting to want to be more masculine. And one of the most important things I think we have to focus on is that we don't want it just to be like sort of shallow avatars of masculinity and femininity. Part of the conflict theory's victory is that it keeps things really shallow and stupid. And stupidity is the point. So what we need to do is we need to really deeply embody these things. What does it really mean to be a good father? What does it really mean to be a good mother? Those things are incredibly powerful, and it takes a mountain of propaganda to pull them away from us. So we need to reclaim them with a lot of confidence, and also, let our lives be models for other people. And also new media, Frontier, my other project, Theology of Home. We have books and a lifestyle magazine and brand. These things are important to show people this is what a good life looks like. They haven't been shown it for decades.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, I mean, at least one origin story. You probably have multiple. For Noelle is the book with your co-author, Theology at Home, which I just assumed sold like, 1 billion copies because everyone I know has it. And the second one, because there was a sequel. But could you go back to that? Because I think the success of that, and then the products you guys sell with Theology at Home, it's very interesting. But how did it start? Like, what was the genesis of that?
Well, Carrie Gress, my co-author, she came up with the phrase theology of home, and we've just been thinking about how do we help women to see that motherhood is actually a really beautiful calling, that being at home with your children can be a really beautiful, meaningful, purposeful life, when for decades it's been drilled into them that it's a waste of their gifts, that they're going to be oppressed and their husband's going to be domineering. And how do we show the actual beauty of this life that we're experiencing and so many of our friends are experiencing? And so we thought, the left has seeded ideology into their media for decades. Cosmopolitan magazine showing women can never be a mother, can never be a virgin, that you have to be promiscuous in order to be powerful. All of these lifestyle lies. And so we thought, how do we counter that with beautiful media that actually presents a powerful vision of what women and men can be?
Just I would say, what I like about those books too is just positive. It's like laying out, like, here's the theology of a house, and like what goes on within the family, and then the beauty of the pictures, etc. And that positive vision is just so important, and that's, I'm glad you mentioned Frontier. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
But we should put something in the next frontier from you, because it's very much the same vibes. But let's go to the future real quick. What's your next book? Because I think it relates to sort of the next battle that you were talking about in the beginning with children.
Yeah, so I'm writing and researching right now about a new movement happening called the Going No Contact movement, where, adult children most often are going no contact with their parents and their families over really ideological reasons. And I think it mimics a lot of the Marxist kind of oppressor-oppressed categories, where children start to see themselves as not only oppressed by their parents, but also infallible in their decision to diagnose their parents as toxic, as narcissists, or what have you. Now, sometimes that's true, sometimes that's real, but there are millions of forums online now with a lot of ideological agendas and also financial incentives to keep young adults really in a place of antagonism with their parents, in order, I think, to do like a sort of a parasite. It's like killing off the father and the mother. And this is an old plan, the abolition of the family, and they tried in various different forms. They've been trying with school children, K through 12. But this is the newest form, I think, that it's taking place, and it deserves to be examined.
Where do you see this attack on the family going? Because they have been doing it for decades. We've seen this, and I think that people are they're starting to at least wake up to the old ways, right? They're noticeable now, and you can say, oh, I can identify that, I can see what they're doing. But where does it go? Because that it's really a good versus evil battle, and they're not going to stop, because the family is that nucleus that everything will revolve around.
Yeah, I think that they just will try various forms of manipulation. They always happen in 3 stages: pity, and then fear, and then force. This is how ideologies manipulate you. And pity, that's the one where, the children are going to be seen as being, their full freedom is not being able to be lived out. And this is what they did with the trans movement. It's what they're doing with social emotional learning in certain cases, and this is what's happening with the no contact movement. It's really tempting, because it appeals to a universal temptation that we all have to see that all of our problems are external from ourselves. That if I could just change everything but myself, then my life will be happy. There's a pleasure in that, but it makes us really irate. It makes a society that's roiling in conflict. But once you see that ideology right in the heart of the family, between parents and children, you can really explode the health and wholesomeness of the family. And then society is a ripple effect.
Is the goal to explode this ideology? What is the first thing that needs to happen? Is it the parents waking up then and realizing, oh my gosh, this is what they're trying to do? And seeing it clearly? Is it the child also? Because I assume, for teenagers, right, they would need to see, this is what they're doing to me. But it sounds like you're primarily parents focused.
Yeah, I think parents first and foremost need to be on the front lines of understanding what's happening, so that they can be aware of, this happening at the schools, but also what's happening online. These forums are reaching kids, and they are spreading these ideas really rapidly. And there's a real social contagion happening. So I think parents first and foremost need to take the reins over this, but also young adults too. I think that we need to train them that it's not it's not a flourishing message to think that I'm a victim of my circumstances, or that my parents are not an avenue for my good. Actually, this is the promise of stability. We have a loneliness epidemic for decades now, but now what we're seeing is people who are, going through life without the actual safety net that they should have, this buffer of support throughout their life when they're in crisis, emotional or physical or sickness or what have you. So I think that young adults are capable of seeing this manipulation as well, and we need to help them to see it as well.
So Noelle, where can people pick up Awake Not Woke, and where can people follow you?
Theology.home, theologyofhome.com, and eppc.org are the best places.
Excellent. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Thanks for having me.
Jill Savage and Matthew Peterson here at America Fest, and we are excited to welcome Khalil Habib. He's a Hillsdale College professor, and I look at just the state of education right now, and I think somebody from your team has a mega hat, not a MAGA hat. It says Make Education Great Again. I think that we might have an opportunity to do that because we have gone so far down the path on one way, we have to start pulling back, and that's what Hillsdale is doing.
That's exactly right. In fact, that was the first time I saw the hat was this morning. We have a beautiful model wearing it. His name is Juan. He's fantastic. That's part of reclaiming education. That's part of it, there's no doubt.
So why were you here?
I was invited to give a talk on Marxism, of all things, and the title, which I did not come up with, but I thought it was great, why does it persist to haunt America and the world? And the basic thesis that I put forward, drawing exclusively from Marx's writings, was that Marxism feasts on capitalism, and as long as there's prosperity in capitalism, and as long as there's a state, i.e. borders, and as long as there's religion, Marxism will persist because it sees those as formidable enemies for advancing a kind of march of history towards a utopia. So it creates this very adversarial relationship with nations, with religion, especially the Catholic Church, with capitalism and private property. So somebody like Trump, who runs on a closed border or national interest first, and he defends Christianity, he would be a total persona non grata in the new Marxist world that we now have. So
yeah, and private property rights are essential to a free capitalistic society because you have to have some ownership, some skin in the game. You have to say, this is mine, and I have to work for it to keep it and to have that to continue everything.
Correct. Well, it's intrinsic. I mean, anyone who advances a theory of private property, whether actually it's Aquinas or John Locke, the idea is that these are rights that are given to you by God and nature's God. They're not they're not entitlements given to you by government. And the whole purpose of a classical liberal form of government would be to create a government that would protect those. But the understanding is these are inalienable rights that come from a higher authority than man or government. But you can see why it's so important that natural rights never loses contact with the traditional belief in Christianity and in the necessity of government. And Marxism opposes both of those things.
Yeah, so this is so important because there's a lot of, for a good reason. The good reason is that we're going back to first things all over the place. Like philosophy is new again. It's in the headlines. Mm-hmm. Everyone here, I hear these debates about what citizenship is. This is just what people are asking these as open-ended questions because they're confronted with them in order to move forward in the kind of open-ended frontier that we're living in right now. So to go back to the natural rights, don't you see it as interesting that there's a lot of people who want to combat Marxism, communism, whatever, but they don't really necessarily want to ground those rights in the laws of nature and nature's God?
Yeah, the danger in that is you're playing right into Marx's hands because according to Marx and many of his followers, like Daniel de Leon, for example, the obstacles that prevent Marxism for full, complete takeover of history are exactly what you just said, natural rights and religion. And so if you think you can have a conservative post-liberal position, good luck, because those are formidable barriers towards Marxism. So I think what is so great about what I'm feeling right now across the country and also just even in Europe is people are waking up to the necessity of national sovereignty, to the necessity of the protection of rights, to the consent of the governed, because the left has overplayed its hand. I mean, it's been taking people's borders and their national sovereignty and rights away, and the reaction has not just been in America, it's been global, especially even in Europe.
Yeah, so I want to talk about that reaction, especially here. But it is interesting to me that this, what you're describing, this debate won't go anywhere. I'll tell you, everyone in the audience, because there's so many people who, even on the sort of new realigning coalition, are either, sort of watered down, right, not liberalism of the last, 60 years. Right. They don't want to talk about nature or God, or sort of transhumanist, tech future, but anything goes. Yeah. And we're going to find out again that we need to go back to actually what the good professor is talking about. But I'm curious, you came from Hillsdale, right?
Correct.
So you came from the college campus.
All these opinions are mine. They don't reflect the college. Whatever the usual caveats.
I think some of them may kind of reflect a lot of the college.
No comment.
But look, you flew from Hillsdale, Michigan, which is a wonderful place, pristine place, came to Phoenix, and you walked in and you gave a talk about all these, highfalutin ideas to a big crowd. How did that go?
We had to turn people away. It was crazy. We were violating the fire code. I think they thought Tucker was talking first of all. And then when they saw me, half the room left. But so it was packed. They were very much engaged. They had to kick us out of the room after it was over. People were quite engaged. What I did was essentially take out passages from the 1844 manuscripts and also the Communist Manifesto, and just read them out loud and literally engaged as if we were having a conversation at the dinner table. And people were very much responsive. They were totally, they wanted to follow up afterwards and have conversations and exchange emails. So we went over really well. I couldn't have asked for a better audience.
I remember my first real dive deep into communism and Marxism was with Reagan in his own hand, his radio addresses back in the 70s as the governor of California. And he would go through and he would just write about, okay, this is what communism looks like, right? And I look at Donald Trump on the campaign trail this year, along with J.D. Vance. They were both very good at saying this is the renewed American dream. We need to make sure that you have that ability to go out and be, everything that you can be and have that great idealism. But when I would read Ronald Reagan, and he would be like, okay, well, what's happening is you're not all going to be at the top equally. You're going to be at the bottom equally. They want to make sure that you have equal outcomes, and they will take everything away from you so that you all start at the same level. And to me, I just remember being, I was probably like in early high school when I first really started diving into this, and I just couldn't believe that this is something that a large portion of the world is like, yeah, that's the idea. We need to go further down this path.
Yeah. I mean, I think the problem with Marxism is it is so out of touch with reality and just human nature. People want to be part of a prosperous society. I think the reason why Marxism morphed into cultural Marxism is they couldn't win the debate on economic terms and on political terms. Tocqueville makes this observation about America where everybody in America, regardless of how poor they are, have this optimism about their future, that they will at least be better off than the generation before them. And I think that's a really interesting observation on his part. And I think messages from Reagan to Trump that speak about prosperity and greatness really resonate in the human heart. And Marxism can't really touch that. You're going to have income inequality. But at the end of the day, people recognize that there is something to be said about the fact that if you put in enough work and discipline and focus, and that you can achieve upward mobility and prosperity, that's always going to speak, I think, to the optimistic spirit of Americans.
So you were saying before we came on as well that in the speech you talk about a spiritual warfare in regards to Marxism. Explain that.
Correct. Well, I think when a lot of people, so one of the comments that I got after the talk was from a professor of economics. And he said that he had always been teaching Marx and he'd been teaching him from an economic point of view. It's like teaching Adam Smith from an economic point of view. You're going to get a lot out of it, but neither were really economists. They were political philosophers. And so the dimension that he said he had never seen before is how Marx, in many ways, speaks in language of eschatology and theology, whether he knows it or not. He sees the world in this binary of oppressor and oppressed. But at the end of the day, he believes that what he's doing is overcoming a certain kind of evil, and he identifies religion among the biggest obstacles to his utopia. To me, that is a spiritual warfare, and as long as you understand Marx in terms of just cheap sneakers versus, high cost of labor, you're going to lose the argument, because there's more to Marx than just making an economic argument. He himself makes a theological argument, I believe, in most of his writings. Now, most people wouldn't agree with that definition, but what I mean by that, it presupposes a certain hostility to religion and to hierarchy, and especially to the Catholic Church, that I think needs to be really looked at carefully.
I want to bring this into today's conversation, and we're here at AmericaFest. Donald Trump has been reelected. Everybody here is very excited to see what the future has.
This is the real party of joy, Jill.
It actually is,
party
though,
of joy.
right?
Trump is on the way. He'll be here tomorrow.
Where they were trying to make it out on the leftists, they would tell you they were joyful. Were they actually living a life of joy? People really wouldn't think so. They would have to convince you how joyful they were, and whenever you have to do that.
They spent the $1 billion staging the party of joy.
Yes.
It shows you how out of touch they were, and the reason why I think Trump was so successful. There was many reasons. One of them was the party that couldn't handle inflation and couldn't understand the average American's financial burdens was celebrating joy at a time when none of their party or most Americans weren't experiencing any joy. So just to show you how aloof and disconnected, and I think Trump's ability to connect with the American voters is just
they're used to just being able to tell you this is what you should feel,
right.
Feel it, right? But that's not exactly what's going on. People can feel that disconnect in their own lives, and they're like, something's not
right.
Well,
do you remember
here.
when the mainstream media would have video of whatever president, like in shopping for milk, and they're supposed to know what the price of milk and all that? What happened, since Trump first ran is he single-handedly destroyed the traditional media. He called them fake news until people got the message. And then when Elon purchased Twitter and basically allowed people to just stream and tweet, and then whether it is misinformation or not, people are able to communicate what's happening on the ground immediately. The message of the mainstream media, like feel joy, just fell on deaf ears. There's another media now, and it's really organic. It's from the ground up.
Yeah, this is one of the most amazing things about the last few years, right? Was that purchase. I think it's interesting to think about in terms of you, our professor of statesmanship, political philosophy. That's what Hillsdale's all about. It's interesting to think about how in the commercial and cultural space now, there is a kind of statesmanship that people aren't talking about. Because what Musk did was an act of statesmanship. There's no way around that,
It's so funny. I just had this.
Yeah.
So after my talk, somebody came up to me and they said, what do you think about entrepreneurship? Has there been a decline in it? And I said, you don't understand entrepreneurship. By definition, it's exceedingly rare. If you look at Austrian economics, they look at entrepreneurship, strictly speaking, from an economic point of view. It's recognizing inefficiencies and capitalizing them. That's not sufficient. Statesmanship is what entrepreneurialism truly is. And if you look at all the great innovators in our country, from Ford to Elon, they've all taken a stake in position in politics because they see that true entrepreneurship is taking advantage and figuring out a way to overcome inefficiencies in daily life and government. It's not simply something that's just commercial. And I think if you look at it, all great entrepreneurs have always had an eye toward politics, towards the law. And in fact, again, Alexis de Tocqueville, one of the points that he makes in Democracy in America is that America is a place where you're going to have innovation and industry, but the only way it's possible is if the captains of industry are connected to global politics and domestic politics, because it's the nature of all our businesses now to be connected to politics. So entrepreneurship is not just about econ, it's about politics.
And I love it on our side because you can go through and century after century after century, it holds true,
Absolutely.
Right? We have that on our side. Khalil, it's been such a fascinating conversation. Where can people follow you at?
I'm not on social media, but you can reach out at Hillsdale. I know, maybe I should get on. Let's see.
Elon owns X.
If you go
now,
to
it's
Hillsdale's
okay.
faculty page, right?
Come on.
I can go on X now. That's
right.
I'll create a Twitter. I'll follow Matt.
Free speech
Matt
is going
might
to
be the only
live.
follower I get.
There you go. Well, Khalil Habib, such a great conversation. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.